For the record, I am Ben Brown, Senator for the 26th District, and I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to present Senate Committee Substitute for Senate Joint Resolution 31. For the last decade, Missouri has experienced one of the slowest rates of population growth since our state's founding. SJR 31 presents us with an opportunity to change that and reform our tax policy in a revenue-neutral way, one that would be truly historic, making us the 10th state in the nation to eliminate our state's income tax. I believe you all should have distributed a packet of material. And while we obviously do not have exact numbers on population loss or growth for calendar year 2024, there are a number of resources available that do provide some remarkable insight into overall migration trends from state to state. One such resource is the 2024 U-Haul Growth Index. And in the packet that you should have before you, if you turn to, I believe it's the third page, it will show a ranking of all 50 states in terms of population growth. And the interesting thing to point out here, if you look at the top 5 on this list, you have South Carolina, Texas, North Carolina, Florida, and Tennessee. 3 of the top 5 states in terms of population growth are states that have an income tax of 0%. If you expand this to look at the top 7, 4 of the top 7, including the state of Washington, have a 0% income tax. Now, if I could draw your attention to the bottom of the list, I'd just like to point out that out of the bottom 5, 3 of the bottom 5 states here, that means losing population, have an income tax rate of over 10%. Trailing the list would be the state of California with an income tax rate of 13.3%. While this report does an excellent job of tracking nationwide migration trends, I felt compelled to dig into these numbers a little deeper and take a close look at specifically how Missouri stacks up in comparison to the 8 states that border us. After all, these are the states that we are in direct competition with in regards to attracting people to move here. So if you go to the front page of your packet, there's a spreadsheet with some data that I compiled, and it shows the states ranked first in the second column. It has them ranked in order of lowest income tax rate. So you can see where Missouri falls on the list. We're number 6, so kind of towards the middle, towards the bottom, with a rate of 4.8%. And the interesting thing is we rank 6th in terms of lowest income tax rate. We also happen to be 6th in terms of population growth. And the correlation, it really goes even deeper than that. If you look at the 5 states that have a lower income tax rate, those are also the same 5 states that are outperforming us in terms of population growth. If you look at the 3 states that have a higher income tax rate, those also happen to be the 3 states that are lagging behind us in terms of population growth. Now, while income tax rate isn't necessarily the only metric used when determining where to move, the correlation is simply undeniable. And it really paints a vivid picture illustrating that income tax rate is certainly one of the most prominent drivers of population growth in recent years. So the question before us is, how do we get there in a fiscally responsible manner that would not put at risk the essential services our state provides through our general revenue? In the months leading up to pre-filing for this session, we were able to really build a strong coalition who brought a wealth of knowledge and experience to the table, including analysis of states around the country who have been moving to lower, flatter taxes or eliminating income tax entirely. We looked at what other states have done well, and we looked at states who have attempted this and what they have not done well. And we utilized this data to put together a multi-step process for how we could achieve this in the state of Missouri. The first step would involve instituting spending caps. The passage of Senate Joint Resolution 31 would mark the beginning of a new era of fiscal responsibility by instituting spending caps on the General Assembly. Revenues grow exponentially over time. However, history has shown that when government revenue grows, spending tends to grow just as quickly. Government by nature tends to lack efficiency. However, the one thing that unfortunately the government has always done efficiently is finding new and creative ways to spend our tax dollars. This would directly tie the amount that general revenue appropriations could be expanded year after year to population growth. If our growth in population is between 0 and 1%, then increase in spending would be limited to 1%. If population growth is over 1%, then the spending limit increases would match that percentage. For instance, if population grew by 3.6%, then the increase in spending would be limited to a 3.6% increase. However, there is a mechanism for increasing or even suspending the cap amount if there were some kind of emergency type situation that would deem that necessary, though it would be subject to approval by the legislature. You could double the cap to 102% of the previous year. That would require a 2/3 vote of the legislature, or you could suspend the cap entirely, which would require a 3/4 vote of the legislature. Either of these would be effective till the end of that fiscal year, or until a point at which the legislature would decide to end the suspension. Step 2 would be the creation of reserve funds. This bill establishes 2 separate reserve funds. If net general revenue collections exceeded expenditures by $1 million, excess revenue would be split between the 2 funds established by this SJR, with 50% going towards each bucket. These funds would be known as the Tax Reform Fund and the Budget Responsibility Fund. The Tax Reform Fund would have a few uses. If there was a budget shortfall the year following any tax cuts under the provisions of this bill, the Tax Reform Fund could be used to supplement any areas of necessary funding. Current law imposes a sales tax rate of 4.225%. This amendment would provide that in any year where there is a general revenue surplus of at least $1 million, the sales tax rate would be reduced by 0.01% for each $45 million in the Tax Reform Fund. This would continue until the sales tax rate reached 4%. Once the sales tax rate was reduced to 4%, the fund can be used to gradually reduce and eliminate the corporate income tax as certain metrics are met. If and when the corporate tax was ever eliminated, the fund could then be used to establish a strategic gold and silver fund, which would provide an element of economic stabilization in the event of a recession. The Budget Responsibility Fund would be used if the state experiences a budgetary shortfall. It could be expended to make up for any budget shortfalls with a 2/3 majority vote of the legislature. At the close of each fiscal year, if the Budget Responsibility Fund maintains a balance greater than 50% of the previous year's general revenue fund, the amount in excess of that 50% will be transferred to the Strategic Gold and Silver Fund. Step 3, broadening our sales tax base. This amendment would repeal provision of Article 10, Section 26 of the Constitution, which created a number of exemptions on sales tax, particularly barring sales tax on a number of services. This would allow us to broaden the sales tax base in a way that would enable us to eliminate the state income tax upon its implementation in 2027 with little to no change in the overall sales tax rate. Though I will point out that this is an evolving process and the exact starting sales tax rate will be determined by a number of variables, including what, if any, services would still be subject to a sales tax exemption. For instance, business-to-business transactions, new home sales, et cetera, et cetera. Though the fine points of this proposal may change as it moves through the process, there are a number of paths that would provide us with an opportunity to eliminate the income tax entirely in a completely revenue-neutral way. I ask the committee that you join me, our governor, our friends over in the House working on this, and the several other bill sponsors presenting today in this ambitious vision for the future of our state, one where Missouri will be looked to as a leader in our region, rather than continuing to lag behind our neighbors. One where we can send a clear signal to citizens around the country that Missouri is among the very best states in our nation to live, work, and raise a family. Thank you.